Hello, Jeff Minier with Shiloh Baptist Church of Bowie, Maryland. We're now into session number 4 in a series I'm doing on the biblical view of death and grieving. How that we could grieve well with the little trials and losses and pains and heartaches of life, so that with the big ones, when our hearts, it would seem our very guts are ripped out, we know what to expect. We know we've handled it before. We have a track record that has proven that God will never leave us or forsake us. And we can handle this unbelievable new tragedy, knowing God will never leave me, no matter how fuzzy-headed and foggy I may feel. God is with me. I will hold tight to him. He will get me through. And unbelievably, in the worst things possible, Romans 8:28. And when I want it, I can't quote it quite right, so let me look it up for you. Romans 8:28. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, those who have been called according to his purpose. We don't walk into a funeral. We don't walk in during the first couple weeks of grieving and use this as though this is going to alleviate all the pain in the world. But it is true. And we know that in every possible situation, all things, God works for the good of those who love me, who love him, who've been called according to his purpose. There are unbelievable tragedies. There's unspeakable violence God might allow us to go through, but his promise stands. I can lean on him, and he will work the most tragic loss, the greatest crisis, the most unspeakable thing we could experience. He will work it for his glory and our good as we rest and lean on him. So that first phrase or first coat hook of grieving is the short crisis period. We looked last time at the crucible period. That'll be a good 12 weeks, 90 days without any trouble at all. The first 6 weeks being the most intense. And then we move into the construction phase. In the crucible phase, our job in that, because with each phase, you have what can I expect lengthwise, what can I expect to experience, what can I expect for a responsibility for me to do who's grieving, and what can I expect to try to do as one who cares and wants to be a help, wants to be a support. So in the crucible phase, my job when I'm grieving is to cut the emotional ties connected with what I lost so I can let go and so I can start rebuilding new pieces of life. The construction phase, this third phase, is all about construction, rebuilding life patterns. The length of time, and this is again where our culture does not do us any favors. Our culture is microwaves. One of the most funnest Christmas presents I got my wife this past year was an Instant Pot. It mixes a couple of different things. It mixes the inversion burner with a pressure cooker, a slow cooker. It's a fun thing. But it just mirrors our culture. Instant, instant, instant. And many of those things are a great help. The problem is, we now have a neighbor who lost their husband, and they need someone to hold their hand for weeks and weeks and months, and they're grieving entirely too long, says the American culture who's instant everything. What can I expect when I've just lost my job? When I have bottomed out again, I've gotten into drug rehab, and I'm actually trying to construct a life that might stay clean and be productive for the rest of my life. How long? What can I expect here? I want you to feel very comfortable with a 2-year time span. And this comes out from very different experiences, but a 2-year mark comes up astonishingly often. Joni Eareckson Tada was a young Christian teenage gal, dove into a shallow end of a pool and snapped her neck, then a quadriplegic the rest of her life. As she tells her own story of fighting with God, angry at God, it takes her 2 years to get herself functional enough she can start moving forward. Now for her life, the construction phase didn't really start until 2 years are up. My wife, after the tragic car accident that gave her a brain injury, left her initially paralyzed on her left side. She's mad at God for 2 years because God could have stopped this. I know he's in charge. And so I'm mad at him that he didn't stop this, my wife was feeling. And it's kind of embarrassing when the assistant pastor's wife won't come to church for 2 years because she's mad at God. A totally different study found that when you're trying to help a woman who is married to an abusive alcoholic and she's finally free of him, if she doesn't stop and keep away from dating for 2 years, guess who she'll start dating and remarry time after time and time again? But if she stays away from men for 2 years, she will heal enough and process enough of her own stuff so she'll actually find a solid, decent person to marry and move on with in life. It's just an amazing amount of times a 2-year phrase, time cycle, is what it takes for us humans to start building life well. So right up from the front, I've wanted you to know, what can I expect with grieving? Expect it to be long. Now, when they are little losses, my favorite car just had an accident, it's total, it's gone. Yeah, I may be bummed out for a couple of days, but it was a car. And as we figure out our finances, I get a new car and away I go. I lose people, I lose relationships, I lose my livelihood. Oh, those are much bigger slams. Something happens, I'm aging, and I lose an ability to do thus and so. In American culture, one of the greatest things in our life is turning 16 or 17, depending on the state, and getting a driver's license. Have you had the pleasure of dealing with an aging person and taking their license away from them? Expect that they will grieve and grieve hard. They've just lost their independence. How do we cut the emotional strings with the hope of independence? And yet if I instantly go blind, I just lost independence. I can regain a number of things, but I lost it. And so we need to expect people to seriously grieve. So this construction phase, I want you comfortable with the idea that grieving may take long, and for big losses, it may well take up to 2 years, and that's okay. So what must we who are grieving, hurting, do? As I have cut the emotional strings with what I lost, I must now start to reinvest in life somewhere. Some people are by nature task-oriented, and that's okay. Other people are people-oriented. They're all about relationships. They will do tasks if they get to be with people. Others only want to do tasks they can't stand to be with people. Wherever, when you are grieving and needing to start moving forward and investing in life, I would encourage you to be task-oriented. I'm grieving, I want to get moving again. Who can I go help do a task? I'm getting something accomplished. I'm starting to move forward in life again, but I don't feel strong enough emotionally, personally, to just dive out and get everything moving. Start doing tasks so that you can see productivity, rebuild confidence, start investing in family, in friends and starting to rebuild your social connections. That is the goal in this 2-year time frame. Now, for some of us, with the death of a family, we may only get a month off of work and we're slammed back in. We need to keep dealing with our grieving process while we've been slammed into motion forward. Deal with it. It may still take that 2 years behind the scene before you feel you're becoming stable. So I'm on the outside watching a grieving loved one, a friend, a neighbor. How do I help them during this time? How do the rest of us help? One of the things that I was so blind to for years, when you realize a family member has lost a spouse, write down the date and make sure they don't go through the anniversary of the loss alone. Make sure they don't go through their lost spouse's birthday alone. Their wedding anniversary, let's not let them go through that alone. Let's invite them out to eat. Let's invite them over. Let's get them with people who are alive on the very days they're grieving. Now, if they say, I can't today, love on them and set it up for as soon as possible so that they're experiencing life when the cycles of life bring that loss back to play and they feel the weight of it again. Don't let them go through Christmas alone. Bring them into your family Christmas. We can be there. We can be touching base. We may have backed it off from once a day to once a month to once every 3 to 6 months, but we can be on top of the anniversaries, the birthdays, and we can be there to encourage them and let them know that it's okay when you're still struggling 6, 9, 10, 14 months down the road. God never said we had to have life all together in some little, small, artificially created American time slot. We have a God who said, I will never leave you or forsake you. We had a God who, with Psalm chapter 1, blessed is the man or woman, the elder or the child, who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, or stand in the way of the sinners, or sit in the seat of the mocker. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. He is like a tree planted by the streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, whose leaf does not wither. And whatever he does, whatever she does, prospers. Not so the wicked. They're like the chaff that the wind blows away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord watches over the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. You may have to go through months, weeks, trying to figure out what's going on. How do I get a direction in life? Where do I turn? That's okay. When your heart can focus, when prayer actually seems to get beyond the ceiling and you can put 3 sentences together, seek the Lord, rest in the Lord, start to meditate on his word again. He will bring the fruitfulness of the life that you need. And here's just a tiny side point. Sometimes we don't have family nearby. Deb and I have often found, because as missionary church planters, the whole point has been we've had to move away from family to start revitalize churches. Our church family has almost always been closer to us than our blood family. Not because we don't love our blood family, but they're not right here. They're not walking with us through it. If you don't have a good church, I encourage you to do everything you can to find one. Find a friend who has a good one to increase the family you have. So, our 5 steps here of biblical grieving. Number 1, understand a biblical view of death, dying, and grieving. Number 2, the crisis stage. Short, from the point I'm told of the loss until I can let go. The crucible phase, 90 days, a good 12 weeks of trying to process and what is I'm supposed to do there. The construction phase, the next 2 years after that, of starting to get a direction in life and get moving again. Come join us for our last time as well, as we talk about a celebration of life.